So, and I think I'm gonna make this just very, very
Okay.
casual, and so
Yeah.
jump in, but I think that the outline of some of the things I wanted to talk about might help you with your sales pitch.
Mhm.
to
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
So I just obviously feel that recreation's critical in part
My
throughout
background is
life.
physical therapist, so I'm on that page that some people never get on.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I can shortcut.
Yes.
Shortcut with care. So what I always make sure and start any program with defining recreation, because people define it differently.
Mhm.
And then I like to look at the benefits, and then really what I wanna do is look at how to include recreation in caregiving, both for the caregiver and the care recipient. Because I think both of them benefit from it. And it, I'll get on my soapbox and we'll never get anywhere.
Go
So,
for it.
the big thing first is just defining recreation. And usually what people, when you say, what do? They say, I play music, I hike, I horseback ride, I read, I garden, I play golf. They define recreation by the activity that they do and how they do it. I disagree with that, and I always use gardening as my example as to why I disagree with it. I have friends who love gardening. They're finally now ecstatically putting away their seed catalogs because it's spring and things are coming up and they're all excited. I'm like, ugh. It's dirty, it's hot. The best thing my garden can do is die by July, so I'm done with it. And part of that is because I grew up north and our growing season was a more reasonable 3 months, not this ridiculous things are blooming in April and they're gonna keep doing it until October. So, rather than define recreation by the activity, and here's a few other reasons that it doesn't work, not just because I don't like gardening, but when a child is first learning to play the violin, one of my easy examples, having raised some violin players, it's not fun for them. It's a lesson, I'm making them practice, but eventually, when it starts to sound like music, and it starts to be rewarding, and you start getting feedback from others and yourself, it starts to feel more like recreation. And then if you actually become good at it and enjoy performing or playing with others, it is recreation. Same thing, if I get off work at 5 and I rush home and I throw in a hot dish and I get everybody fed so that we're at the soccer game by 6:45, that is not recreational baking, or I love to cook. That is get people out the door with nutrition. But if we set aside a whole day and to bake for the holidays, and the grandkids come over and we talk about why this recipe is in our family and why we make it and who it reminds us of, and we spend that whole day with stories and we end with beautiful and delicious box of goodies, that is recreation for me. That's something I've enjoyed doing. Even the easy example of obligatory reading and assigned reading versus your book club. I mean, sometimes you don't even need to read the book for book club, you just need to bring the bottle of wine. So, what I do when I define recreation is I define it by certain qualities. And the first and most important one is it's free, unobligated time. You do it because you want to, not because you have to, not because someone's expecting you to, not because your spouse wants you to. It's what you want to do, not have to do. And I also define it more so by the results. If it leaves you feeling happy and satisfied and relaxed and maybe a sense of accomplishment, then it's recreation. And so gardening can be recreation for some people, and the same activity can be a chore for others. So it's that why do I do it and what's the result of doing it? And there are two schools of thought in the field. One is that recreation is inherently therapeutic, because anything that leaves you feeling restored and happy and a sense of satisfaction is therapeutic. But where therapeutic recreation comes in and where we use it more as a tool is when we have specific goals that we're working toward and we use a recreational activity toward those goals. We're strategic in our selection of what to do. And so that is true for everybody, all ages of life. And there are those inherent benefits to recreation. I'm just going to briefly go over what those are before we look at how we adapt them. And the first and obvious one is your physical health.
Sure.
Physical health. what's the CDC say now? It's currently 2.5 hours a week of moderate activity, 2 days of strengthening, and that sounds like a chore. But if you say you should walk your dog every day, you should meet a friend at the wetlands for a walk, maybe take a fitness class twice a week, staying active equals wellness, equals health. And you just want to package that better in a more, I guess, palatable approach. In caregiving specifically, I do like to remind you that it can re-energize you, doing some physical activity. Even though it sounds like a lot to even put your shoes on and get out the door, if you do it, if you get in even a 20-minute walk, or as Sharon was saying, she's a runner and she still runs, that can energize you, it can restore your energy, and it can help, importantly, maintain your physical strength, because physical strength can become part of caregiving. You're transferring, you're assisting, you might just be doing chores that your spouse used to do, and now suddenly you need the strength to do them. So general health and fitness is one of the benefits of recreation, but also it helps in the mode of recovery. If you've had illness or injury and you're coming back from that, physical therapy is great, and I don't know what percentage of people keep doing what you tell them to do after they're done with therapy. It's real hard, yeah. We've actually, a benefit of being out at the sports pavilion, and we have LMH has a PT there. The physical therapists now know the classes that I have, and they will recommend specific classes that are consistent with the goals that people have been working on. And it's more affordable, it's got a social element to it, and then people keep up with doing it. So that's another benefit, another look at the physical benefits of recreation. And another thing for caregivers that I point out is you can link it to something else you're already doing. Sometimes you feel like you have to do things, which is why my grandkids think it's entertaining, but we keep dumbbells by the microwave, because our rule is if you're waiting for something, you have to do bicep curls while you're waiting for something in the microwave. And then we do it because they're right there. We don't have to go do exercise. We do, so bicep curls when you're microwaving. It's a rule of our house. Another thing is obviously cognitive health. Anytime you're learning something new, you're sharpening your mind, you're learning new skills, you're making new connections. In caregiving, it's a glimpse into another world or outside world, and it gets you out of that little cocoon for a while. And one of the panelists at lunch was saying, I learned this, I take this online class, I read that. And I think that's all great, but I also think learn about something that has nothing to do with caregiving. I don't care if it's the French Revolution or upholstery techniques, but learn about something that gets your head into another part of the world, gets you out of that immediate day-to-day situation. I always tie creativity and problem solving together, because people I know who are much more artistic than I will talk about how every decision you make is a little bit of problem solving. What color to use in a painting, where to arrange something in a collage, how to transpose a piece of music. Each of those are a design choice, and it's kind of like, here's a problem, here's a solution, and you move on, and it's satisfying to have something decided and something settled. Also, it can be very cathartic. Music can be very cathartic. Journaling, creative writing, poetry are an opportunity to express some of what you're going through and how it's affecting you, which of course leads to stress reduction. And going back to that original definition of recreation, if you're happy and satisfied and feel a sense of accomplishment, that's stress reduction. So, I've got a picture of somebody doing yoga, but yoga and meditation are very much geared towards stress reduction. But a bike ride can be just as good. Bike ride past the beautiful gardens and pausing to look in the arboretum and enjoying those can lower your stress just as much. And then the third area that we look at for all ages as a benefit of recreation is when you're taking on new roles. And I use this with kids. Kids use play to figure out their social roles, then they take on team sports or theater, and they learn sportsmanship and how to interact with others. And then as you get older, when you're single, you have this set of interests and your friends, and then you couple up, and suddenly you take on some new interests because you're part of a couple. And you start hanging out with other couples, because now it's something different. And then you become parents, and now there's no time to do the things you used to enjoy, and suddenly you find out that you like soccer, and who knew you liked soccer, but you're going to it all the time. Recreation is often a part of changing these new social roles. It's also a way to maintain relationships, certainly over distance, when you have a shared interest and you can talk about that, and you can even participate in something. I think a benefit of COVID, and there's not many of them, but of the COVID era, is we became aware of a lot more things that are available online and ways to connect over distance. And those are staying with us. Those are part of our society now. And you can do I have done this. I've taken online classes with a friend in Minnesota and another one in Colorado, and we're all taking the same class, and then we get together and talk about it afterward. And it's, it was bookmaking or so, it's something very easy, but it was a leisure interest that we all shared, and we got to do that. Same with adult children. You're always their mom, but they don't need you to mom them all the time now. So it's nice to say, hey, we both enjoy this. Let's go do that together. I got to go on a pub crawl by bike for my son's 30th birthday because I ride bikes. I was not gonna hang out with 30-year-olds as a general rule, but it's something to do. And then creating community is, shared interests are often, especially with adults, the first link that you find new friendships. And it was interesting, just last week, we had a bus trip down to Crystal Bridges as part of Parks and Rec. Mm-hmm. And there were 6 people on the trip who had all relocated to Lawrence after retirement. And 3 of them were single. One was widowed and one was a couple. And I kept, over lunch, they were talking about, well, how did you find people? How did you connect with Lawrence, especially if they moved here during COVID, which was particularly hard? And it was always something like, well, you know what? I found the Osher Institute, and I found people who like academic study. I found a church that finally has the interests I do. One of them's a barn dancer, and she said, I found out they have barn dancing in Lawrence, and suddenly she's tapped into that whole traditional music community that she loves. And so it's really a way to create a new circle around yourself and to find new connections. Yeah, I'm not gonna keep going on that. You guys get that.
Yeah.
So, those are the benefits for everyone. I wanna look a little bit now at the caregiving role, but I have to emphasize again that when I say it's something you want to do, not have to do, people think that means it's secondary in importance, and it's not. It's still something. I don't want to give you shoulds and haves and woulds, but it is still very important. And one of those things that's changing is, again, our roles. I talked about you become single, you become married, you become a parent. Think of the changes just in this stage of life. An empty nest, that's a huge change in your social life, and suddenly you don't have a schedule for your children in addition to your schedule and your work schedule and your spouse's schedule. It's a little bit more about you again. And then retirement is a significant change that everybody thinks they will fill completely with recreation. I'm gonna play golf every day, I'm gonna be out on the course, and if they're idealistic, they think, I'm gonna have 40 more hours a week, and you don't. You might have 20 more hours a week, something else fills in that time. But all of those are significant life changes, and recreation can help smooth them. Shared interests, new interests can help fill those times. Caregiving is another significant role change. And it's sometimes gradual, and you don't notice it coming, or there's those milestones like we heard about at lunch. And suddenly, on that day, I knew it was different, and I knew things had changed. So, not only does your role change, but your abilities change. And that's not new either, you know. I am not the person I was when I was 20 years old. I don't have the same physical strengths and abilities. And it's a part of every stage of life, and I think it's good to remember that we've all faced changes before and losses before, and we can tap into what's worked before. You know, if you were a runner and you used, well, I ran into Molly Wood leaving, and she's a runner, and she said that was the best thing about COVID, is you could keep running, you could still do things outside. But you know, if you used to run 10 miles a day, and then you started going, 5K is enough. And then you said, you know, walking's good. And it's still similar, but your abilities change, your endurance might change. Your interests change. I never played sports in my life, do not care for sports, don't have that coordination. But when the Granny Basketball League came to town, because of Parks and Rec, they asked us to help them and get them a gym and get them set up. So I went to their first meeting to make sure they had what they needed, you had the right size balls, you had all this. And I was listening to these women tell their stories of why they love basketball and why they wanted to play. And I thought, I do not like sports, but I want to hang out with these women. They were great. And then they told me that the first rule of Granny Basketball was no running, no jumping. And I thought, this is my sport. So complete change of interest, something I have never done in my life. And now I've been playing for 6 years. So we change for positive reasons too, not just the caregiving. And even our support system, sometimes the thing you enjoy, the team, you know, if the league breaks up, I'm not gonna be playing Granny Basketball. There's no support around. I actually picked this image because it was an interesting support. I have a new neighbor who lives in the rental house across the street. He's a ceramicist, does beautiful work. And he was unpacking in the garage, and he has a kiln and a wheel. And then he realized that the garage doesn't have 220. He can't use his kiln in this rental property. But then he did a little research, and he found out that glass fusing kilns only take 120, and he can, or 100, and so he has switched over, and he's found a whole new creative interest based on what his house electricity can handle. So completely unexpected change of support, reason to change, but he was able to negotiate it and stay active. And the other day, he said, just look at the kitchen, and he's gonna be doing a whole art show just with his new interest, because that's what he's done. So these changes, change of role, change of ability, changing interests, changing supports, are all things that we have to respond to, both for ourselves as caregivers, and then of course, for the person for whom we're caring. Activity analysis is like a whole semester in school. We're not gonna do a whole semester of how to do an activity analysis. It's familiar anyway. But basically, an activity analysis is looking at something, a recreational activity, and what is required to participate in it. What abilities do you need to have? What knowledge do you need to know? What equipment do you have to have? What opportunities need to be present? You know, if somebody really an adult wants to pursue drama and theater, but they live in a small town with no local theater program, they don't have the opportunity that they might need. If you want to play, heavens, this is true. By the time you're in high school, if you're not really serious about sports, it's hard to find a place to play, because you either play super competitively. There's no rec league. There's no rec league anymore at that age. And so the opportunity isn't there. If you love cross-country skiing, but you move to Kansas, you don't get to cross-country ski anymore. You don't have the right weather. So there's a lot of elements that you need to pursue something, and if they're not all there, then you have to make an adaptation. So what I'm gonna do is kind of look first at the care recipient, and then at the caregiver, and what it is, ways that we can adapt certain activities. And I'm gonna mostly use personal experiences and people that I've known, because that way I'm not worried about anybody recognizing someone or any confidentiality. But what we're gonna be seeing with care recipients is a reduction in their cognitive and physical ability, usually. They are not able to do the things as well as they used to, if at all. And that's why when I go back to activity analysis, the thing that we don't always think about, and can't even always answer correctly for ourselves, is what's the real motivation? What's the reason that you do that activity? Because sometimes it's linked to a person who's no longer there, and that activity loses its interest. Or sometimes it's not obvious, and one of the easy examples I have here is bird watching. I've got a lot of friends in Audubon Club, and we saw two of them. One, she was in Audubon Club because her husband was in Audubon Club, and she'd always went on the bird walks, and she always seemed to enjoy them, etc. And as she was less able to go physically, she couldn't handle the uneven terrain, she couldn't handle the walking. And her husband was still going, we're like, that's great, do you want to go? She said, I don't care about the birds that much. They all, I can tell a hawk from a sparrow and all that, but what she really enjoyed was being outside and hiking and the weather. And so for her, sitting out in the backyard and or going to the Arboretum or out to Clinton Lake and sitting at the overlook was as satisfying as bird watching. The motivation, the incentive for her was being outdoors. It wasn't the bird watching. That said, I have a friend whose mother was a bird watcher, and she knew. And what they did for her is they hooked up the laptop to the big TV with one of those Eagle cams, and she watched 2 hours every day. She would watch the bird, the eggs hatch, she watched the eggs get raised, fascinated. You could just see her so calm and so relaxed just watching the Eagle cam. So for her, bird watching was about bird identification and understanding and all of that. My other friend just wanted to be outside. And so it's important to know what the motivation was. Actually, I'm going to use an example in the music world now.
Sure.
Because I'm married to a musician and I know my future. During COVID, he quit playing. And when we talked to other musicians, we all thought, this is your chance, you're gonna really practice. And about 70% of the people we talked to quit playing music.
Really?
Because it was a social sport for them.
Mm-hmm.
My husband's not a disciplined, he wants to play with other people. And that's where the fun was. And he just quit playing. I said, you should play your music. And so, I encouraged him to play, and we came up with reasons. But it also got me thinking about, okay, what if he can't play as well in the future? Part of that would be for his pride. I don't want him to be out there playing badly. I also don't want him to be unwelcome at a jam session because he's really not good at it anymore. But I know that sitting in a room of musicians in a circle and playing is very important to him. So here's the plan. He has a bass ukulele that is electric with rubber strings. If you don't turn that amplifier on, nobody can hear him. But he has all the satisfaction of playing along and being in a circle, and he'll be able to enjoy the experience without throwing off everybody else's rhythm. And the other plan is a hotel mute for the fiddle, so he'll be able to have that experience and not. He also told me which strings are really quieter, so I can restring all the instruments. I'm glad we talked about that now, and I'm glad to know that what's important to him is not being embarrassed by his playing ability and being in a social setting. And that got me thinking about what to tell my kids, and I like handwork. I like stitching, I like knitting, I like all that stuff. And I've told them that in the end, what I like is the repetitive motion. It's like meditation. It's repetitive, the textures, the colors. I don't care if I'm making a bird's nest of yarn every day. Give me some needles and some yarn, and so I just have that tactile experience, that color, and get to enjoy that. So really look at what's the outcome, what's the satisfaction. For me, it's the calming repetition. For him, it's the process of strumming. You need to know those, recognize those things. A third example I'll give of a care receiver. My mom was a card shark. She was a very competitive card player. When her dementia first started and she realized she wasn't as good anymore, she cheated. And she was very good at cheating. But, and we were like, okay, mom's cheating. And we kept playing. Toward the end, I recognized that she didn't know who I was anymore. But really, so many card games, it's the sound of the card shuffling, it's the process of dealing, it's looking for patterns. And we would sit across from each other and I would shuffle and I would deal, and she'd look and she would pick the card she wanted as her trick, and I would take the others as my trick. And then we'd just do it again. We'd deal, select, and play. Those times were when she would really sit across the table from me and look like she enjoyed my company. She still didn't know who I was, but I was playing cards, and so that was good. And so it was familiar sounds, it was familiar tactile. And each of these examples, the music, the stitching, the card playing, one of the biggest obstacles is our own being judgmental about the quality of what they're doing. And we gotta let that go. We gotta focus on the outcome. Oh, she'd be so embarrassed if she knew that she played like this. My mom would have been so embarrassed if she knew she was cheating. But she had changed, her abilities had changed, and this fit her now. It's true, I probably would rather not give you a scarf full of holes, but if I feel happy that I spent all day putting that yarn into a batter, then let that be. So be really careful about not being too judgmental about what they enjoy doing now. If they enjoy it, you're giving that sense of accomplishment, let that be the case. And that is the same thing for us as caregivers. Don't be too judgmental. Don't say, if I can't do it right, I'm not gonna do it at all. Do it. Do something. And part of that is because it helps balance out the time and the responsibility that you have, not just to the person you're taking care of, but the responsibility you have to yourself to still find time to do the things that you enjoy. It increases your coping skills. If you give it that little break, the one panelist talked about just 2 minutes, and I thought, 2 minutes, we shouldn't be hard to find 2 minutes. But if that can be helpful, imagine what a half an hour can do for you. So it really increases coping skills, and I think it helps significantly reduce that sense of being burdened by caregiving. I've given up everything. I'm not getting a chance to do anything for myself. And so you have to be willing to ask for help. And I found that one way to get caregivers to accept that is to say, you're not asking for help for you, you're broadening the caregiving net for your family member. You're making sure there's more people available for them, which is important because something can happen to you tomorrow too, even if it's just a bad cold and you're down for a couple of days. So make a bigger net of caregiving. And people will say they don't have the time and they don't have the money. Investing in yourself is also investing in the safety net for your care recipient. So you want to find the time and money, and I think the biggest thing there is being willing to ask for help. I was happy that Sandy still goes to her fitness class 3 times a week. That's great. That's 1 hour. I have a woman who has confided in me that she takes one of our classes 3 times a week. She said, that's my safety net. That's my lifeline from caregiving. And I said, well, we have a lot of that. She said, no, I have to have this one because this is the one that the home health care staff can cover for me. So we always save a spot for her in that class because I know that's the only one that's going to work for her. One of the smartest women I knew was a caregiver who realized that she couldn't get out, and she had tea every day at 4 o'clock. That was a calm time for her husband. She had a calendar up, and people signed up, and she knew that every day at 4 o'clock, somebody was coming for tea. And it might be somebody from church, a friend, a family member, but there was always somebody who came and gave her that social opportunity every day, that gave her that break. So I think that the easy adaptation is do it shorter, easier, or less often, but still make sure you do it. And that's for yourself and for the care recipient. That's very casual. Before I really wrap it up, what are you thinking? Any specific questions?
Well, I think it's such, that's my world that you talk about,
Yeah.
So it's real easy for me to, but I'm wondering, and this is kind of above and beyond what you were, but is there anything that you have now in art and Park and Rec that would fit a 61-year-old Alzheimer's lady?
How advanced is her Alzheimer's?
She's in the middle of the road.
Okay.
She no longer often can't see a chair or where to sit. She is self-feeding, but only with fingers. She can't hospital. She doesn't dress or undress herself. She has to have help. So she needs help in almost all ADLs. But like the one thing I am so pleased about, because she loves it, is I finally convinced him that Lydia New has a swim pool. And so I learned that their insurance would cover her. So once a week, we go, and Lydia New has been absolutely wonderful, because as a physical therapist, I wouldn't have known what to do, quite frankly. But Terry gets in the pool with her, I get in the pool with her to be the directive, to kind of be her buffer against other people in the pool. And also when she doesn't understand Lydia, then I kind of direct her. I kind of protect her, like if she's swimming across the pool, she's gonna bump her head, I get over there and put my hand there. So I'm just kind of the assistant in the pool. We do it once a week. She absolutely loves it. And she says at the beginning of the week to her husband, when am I gonna see my mom again? I'm not her mom, but her mom is my best friend. And she takes us there, and she sits there at the pool, because we both need to be there to help dress and undress her. Neither one of us could do it by ourselves. So I feel really good about that. That's the kind of, something else I would like to find for her that she could be involved in. Now, we've gone to Rock Chalk and did walk the track some, and been on the machines. But is there anything else, any kind of organized thing that you currently have that she might be able to fit into? Physically, she's very capable, but she doesn't no longer knows how to do that. She can't manage, she doesn't know how to manage her body.
So following directions and following, so, okay.
She can for sure, it's there and then it's gone. You'll throw the ball to her, she'll throw it back. Next time, the ball lands here in the pool, and she doesn't know where it is.
Right.
So just like that, it's gone. And then she'll have moments where she can follow directions, she'll do things, and then just about the time she's got it, they get all jumbled up.
And the problem I've had when I've looked at having care programs for this is there's not enough people in the situation, or caregiving is so unpredictable, it's hard to commit.
Right.
How is her attention span with non-physical activities?
With non-physical, it depends. It's the same thing with the physical. It's here and then it's gone. It's here and then it's gone.
I'm thinking of, it's very academic, but people don't always, we have a film class, a film study class, that the way it's presented, there's always a little lecture at the start, and then we watch the film and stop and discuss.
That wouldn't fit her.
Okay. I'm trying to think of other.
One of the things I was really disappointed, I contacted the music therapist at professors at Gayle. They actually had a grad student who's willing to work with her, and Terry is fluent in Spanish. That was her major. And they actually had a grad student who knew Spanish in music therapy. But because they were in the process of selling their house, the husband, they moved here from Dallas. So the husband was so overwhelmed he couldn't even think about that. I thought it was such a perfect opportunity
Yes.
for a Spanish-speaking person in musical therapy to work with her, but that didn't happen. So I think of the senior groups where they're doing the ribbons and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of that she would do and enjoy, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have,
see her doing it with 80-year-old people.
no, and see,
You
and
don't.
I don't have anything at that level because there's just not enough to support that level.
Yeah, see, that's.
You know, that, we have personal training, so it's one-on-one. And we did recently go to 30-minute sessions as an option because not everybody.
So what's the personal training like?
It's a one-on-one with a personal trainer, and they meet at whatever rec center is most convenient, and just work on whatever goals they have. It can be exercise, it can be, you know, just working on balance, working on endurance, working on strength, and they work one-on-one. In a situation like this where there's maybe a caregiver would be there, as part of it, we wouldn't charge that as a double, we would just have that as extra support.
So what's the charge for that?
Oh, you're gonna test my brain.
Well, just
30 minutes is
approximate.
$25.
30 minutes or 25, okay. And I
I've
think
got a flyer
that's-
out there.
That's something that I could maybe, his job just ended. They're not extremely wealthy, but I think they have plenty of money, you know what I mean? So, and he's willing to do anything she needs. They live, is this Rock Chalk? They live right across the street from the hotel.
Oh.
So
Well,
they're there.
And let me tell you that what a couple of people have done is they sign up, and the caregiver comes to the first session and gets things started, and if it's going well, they go off and do their own thing. In Rock Chalk, the trainer knows where they are if there's any trouble, but if they want to then have their own workout, go shoot some hoops, do something, they can have their own time and know that they're
So what's the frequency on that?
whatever they want to schedule.
Okay.
I do no contract, no commitment, it's
That's a
scheduling.
possibility, I think. That's a possibility.
I think one-on-one might be the
I
best
think that's,
situation.
I think there's some things in groups you could do, but it'd be so limited, like you say, you don't have enough numbers
Right.
to do those kind of things.
I would love to do, even just driving trips for caregivers with their, because, it's fairly passive. Once you're on the bus, we could, you know, do a scenic drive and maybe then, stop for one thing, stop for ice cream, stop for something.
Yeah.
But it's hard for caregivers to commit because they don't know what that day is going to be like. And I think coordinating that maybe with some of the support groups
Yeah.
would be a way to do it.
Well, having been a caregiver for my husband, he passed six years ago, for about 3 years, you can't hardly find the time. You need to find the time
You do.
Yeah.
for someone else to do something for you. But to organize it and plan it
Just
and
like
have
one
it
more
happen,
thing.
it's just like a bigger job than getting the relief.
Yeah,
So,
it can be. But I will then say, though, one of my soapbox is that I think continuing to do something you enjoy, a benefit for the caregiver is it reminds you that you're not just a caregiver. You still have that connection to what you enjoyed
yeah, I
in
think
the
that's what I
past.
thought through as you were talking about.
All right, music therapy.
Do you have your own business, Emily?
I do. This
Okay.
is my business, Harmonic Connections. And as comfortable as you are with it, you can sing with me, but we're going to start with a song. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Karen, a question for you.
Yes.
Should we shine all over Lawrence or should we shine all over Kansas?
Oh, what?
Kansas.
Kansas.
You want
Both.
both. Shine on Lawrence, Kansas. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine on Lawrence, Kansas. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine on Lawrence, Kansas. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
I can see Terry singing along with that.
Can you?
Oh.
This little light, simple, a song a lot of us know. If you don't know it, it's repetitive. In a moment like that, what are we doing? Well, it's upbeat, can get our toes tapping. I'm snapping along to it. If somebody's able to, they can. Maybe you pat your leg to it. It's upbeat, increases the energy. But then also questions such as Lawrence or Kansas. It provides choice. It's also a question that has to do with where we're currently located, which can help with reality orientation. One song, so many different ways it can be used. And we're going to dive into how that looks in music therapy. So Harmonic Connections, you had asked. Harmonic Connections is my business. I started in 2017. I have a few music therapists that work with me. I have an employee position that's open right now. Would love to find another music therapist. So if you happen to know anybody looking, I am hiring. So I work with a wide variety of ages, really from pre-K through older adult. And older adults and working with seniors has just a special place in my heart. It fills my bucket, fills my cup, however you want to word it. And especially working with those in dementia. Anybody in dementia, anybody in dementia or rehab, having suffered stroke, Parkinson's, looking at who an individual was, who they are now, providing a sense of normalcy, be able to regain, especially in rehabilitation, maybe it's regaining skills, but in case of dementia, trying to maintain what you can with independence, with control. Working with older adults, I find it particularly fulfilling. Hello.
Sorry.
No, you're just fine. We are talking about music therapy. So you have arrived as we talk about what is music therapy. Music therapy is clinical, and so as you were mentioning earlier, it can get confused with learning music, taking lessons, but music therapy is in line with physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and I co-treat with those individuals and work on a clinical team with them. It's individualized, so another question I often get is what occurs in a session? And that's also very broad. It depends on who I'm working with, what we're working on. This particular individual, she played clarinet 50 years prior, and we actually learned, and I adapted a situation for her to be able to finger on that clarinet, be able to, as if she was playing it and I was blowing through it. That has not occurred in a session since. That was very specific to her. So the goals, what we're working on, depends on who I'm working with, and I'll give some more examples of what it looks like in working with dementia diagnosis. It's provided by a board-certified music therapist, such as myself. So just like other therapists, we have our credentials. We go to school to get a degree in music therapy. We have to keep up on our board certification. And we're trained to use music to work on particular goals, track the progress on those goals, and reach outcomes with them. And then for me, what's equally as important is how music therapy can bridge gaps. We're such a versatile therapy, and how we can connect progress that's being made in occupational therapy with progress that's being made in physical therapy, for instance. Bridging the gaps with maybe medications being prescribed for certain reasons. Can we enhance those outcomes of that medication with what we're doing in music therapy? Another way that we can bridge a gap. So we use music, and why music? What do we know about it? Music is processed throughout the brain. In research and in scans, we can see that multiple areas of the brain light up when music is being processed, compared to speech and memory, where it might be more centralized locations. What that means is when some of those abilities start to decrease and some of those neurons and those connections are maybe hindered and affected, something like music memory can persist. We also know that music stimulates cognitive function. So from the American Music Therapy Association, they said music can create new neural connections, Music stimulates the use of synaptic connections between neurons in the many specialized areas of the brain, which may otherwise remain dormant and lose function due to the characteristic inactivity of dementia and other memory disorders. So we know with dementia, those synapses start to wither, and music therapy and through the use of music can help maintain other neural connections. It's important though, and you kind of touched on this, Karen, a little bit before we even got started, that it's not about improving maybe that cognitive function, but maintaining or preventing decrease of cognitive function.
Maybe enhancing too.
Enhancing, yeah, that's a great word.
It's not really
Yeah.
improving, but enhancing.
Enhancing, yeah, enhancing. So the benefits, and this is both research benefits, we're an evidence-based practice, so there's a lot of music therapy research that points to these benefits, but also this is a list that I chose to list on here because of what I have seen with those that I work with. Increased alertness and orientation, enhanced cognition, you said enhanced cognition and memory recall, decreased anxiety and agitation, which I see a lot with those that I work with that have gone from in their home to a facility, and that maybe I'm more familiar presence or the music is something familiar for their week to help with anxiety and agitation. Improved communication and meaningful socialization, decreased depression and improved mood, and reduced caregiver stress.
You know, one of
Yeah.
the things with your picture, dance is like acceptable touch. It's
Yes.
like, you would never let anyone hold you that close.
You're right.
You know, if you just came, I'm gonna hold, but you put some music on.
That's right.
Suddenly it's okay for us to touch that much and to be that close. I think that's a great picture.
Well, and it's great that you pointed out. Yeah, that's why I actually chose. I chose that picture. Great minds think alike. That's why we do what we do. But because sometimes in a music therapy session and what we're doing together, more connection can occur because of the music that's being used, because of the interaction that's happening. Maybe dancing is one of them. You know, one of those interactions, which plays a part, you know, with what is mentioned there, reduce caregiver stress, to have acceptable touch, to have interaction that may not occur or maybe you haven't felt that it has occurred in a while, to create those moments. So what does that look like in a session? These benefits. So again, just like the benefits aren't an exhaustive list, neither is that list of what occurs in sessions, but it ties to the benefits I've mentioned and also, again, things I find important with who I'm working with. So music and movement. We were singing This Little Light, okay, I can get the toes tapping, the hands clapping. Something even more, you know, that's a little more passive music and movement that I might do. Choosing the songs that I choose and how upbeat they are become important for increasing energy, increasing blood flow to the brain to get us ready for what else we're going to do in our time together. A more active example of that is this time of year I do Let's Go Fly a Kite, and I have movement scarves and we toss them up in the air and let's go fly a kite, and they catch them. And if I walk in and say, hey, we're going to toss and catch our scarves today, I'm like, okay, I'm like, what, you know, that's not what we do with scarves, we wear them. But it sounds childish, but at the same time, it's kind of like a lot of those aspects of recreation you were talking about, embracing our inner child in that moment, and the joy that comes over the room. I wish everybody could see it, especially, you know, anybody in the facilities, tossing that scarf and catching it as it falls. That movement increases that energy, but then also it's increasing mood and positive mood, and then gets us ready for some of the cognitive exercises that we may do. Again, cognitive, that can really range. Maybe it's that I've said, like I did at the beginning here, this little light, should we shine it all over Lawrence or should we shine it all over Kansas? We're talking about, where are we? Lawrence, Kansas, but also providing a choice. And maybe picking something is a difficulty. That's part of the cognitive exercise. But depending on the stages, and again, if we're in a group, I use going to Kansas City, here I come. And we talk about where did you typically travel with family? So we're getting into reminiscence. And also socialization, again, works if you're in a larger group setting. But, Joyce, she went to California. Joyce, what did you do in California when you went? So that's more open-ended questions and more dialogue that's happening, song discussion that plays part of that cognitive piece. Then what's listed below that for me is even more valuable in incorporating in my sessions, and that's opportunities for leadership or mastery. Opportunities for leadership or mastery. And mastery is that big piece. Having a moment where they don't feel like they're failing at answering a question or doing a task. And for me, it's setting up that environment to be as successful as possible. The more I know about an individual, the more I've worked with them, the more I can do that. But that's also the difference of, where did you go? Where did you travel a lot with your family versus if you could go anywhere, would you go to California or Florida? So narrowing down our options. So that goes on just beyond the music, and again goes into some of our training and music therapists of setting up that moment and structuring things appropriately for that person or that group that we're working with. But another big piece of that, and it kind of goes along with co-creating music together, is the power of music with communication. So part of that, setting up an individual for success, if maybe they're not as verbal. If I go, da, 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 what do we think about? Shaving a haircut, 2 bits. What is shaving a haircut? It's a question and it's an answer. What is conversation? Oftentimes, a question and answer, or a statement and a response. So if an individual is not as verbal, we've still engaged in communication there together, social interaction. The other piece of co-creating music together is something that a lot of us may experience if you've been to a candlelight visual, if you've been to a sporting event, if you've been to church on Christmas Eve and they're singing Silent Night and everybody's holding a candle. That unity of singing with another person or singing with a group is also a part of that communication and that socialization on a more passive level. Music-assisted relaxation can also, again, take many different forms. Can be a more passive or more active experience. I have something called an ocean drum, and it's got small little metal beads in it. And when it's just slightly tipped side to side, it creates the sound of the ocean waves. And we might sing, my body lies over the ocean. And we talk about, being by the ocean, closing our eyes and listening to the sound of the drum. What would you be doing if you were on the beach? So also creating some dialogue with that. That's a more obvious use of music-assisted relaxation. Maybe I'm going into a facility and somebody is distraught, especially if they've recently transitioned there. They're not familiar with the environment. The songs I am choosing in that moment, I may not even be directly in front of that person, but all of a sudden, singing Hound Dog, maybe that's what I was going to sing next, not what I'm going to sing now, something even as Amazing Grace. So choosing a slower song. Sometimes it might mean that I'm finger picking on the guitar and there are no words. Something else, when I think about adapting the music, to go back for a second, that co-creating music, a big piece too is if a person is nonverbal, but they're humming, or sometimes I've worked with individuals that are making up their own song right on the spot, and do. It might even be just nonsensical syllables, and it becomes a song for us. And next thing you know, maybe the whole group is singing that vocalization, and that's another example. Just jumping back there to co-creating music. adapting music in the moment for who I'm working with, and providing expression in that moment too. Something else, assisting with daily tasks. I have written songs about brushing your teeth. I have written songs about getting in the car. Music is a mnemonic device. You think about how you learn your ABCs. You learn them through song, and then it sticks with you. So music can also function in that way. That's another important piece too of if you're working with a music therapist, you have a music therapist working with your loved one, whether in a facility or in home, that can extend beyond the music therapy session. And maybe it's that we communicate and we chat about, oh, we're having a particular difficulty right now with this particular task. Okay, how could music be used in that moment, used in the home, to focus on what you're having difficulty with. And something I didn't mention on this sheet is the reprieve that it provides, music therapy provides, both for caregiver and loved one. Whether that's a reprieve of somebody coming into the home and working with them, and it gives you a little time and a little bit of a break, but also the reprieve that it provides for the individual that's receiving it. You know, those moments of success, for instance, those moments of not feeling like you cannot complete what's in front of you, those moments of feeling more like yourself, the moments of memory and what music can evoke for that person, the reprieve that it provides in all those different areas. But most importantly, and even you touched on this, you were making points before any of us got up here, is what is the ultimate goal? And that's improving well-being through music. That is the ultimate goal. So I wanted to provide some tidbits outside of music therapy, but music in general, and just using music in the home. What are some key things to think about when you're using music? Simple. Don't underestimate the power of simple. You are my sunshine. Right? That's an example of communication happening right there. Somebody being able to finish that line, or that moment of memory of being able to finish that line. A lot of these songs that can seem very simple. I've been working on the railroad, you are my sunshine, this little light, are also the ones that are very ingrained in our brains because they were introduced to us at a very young age, which also ties into familiar songs, whether that's familiar from childhood, but also research has shown that music from our 20s also tends to be really lodged in our memory, and we have some core memories surrounding those years. You think about what develops in your 20s, whether you have graduated college, a lot of times people are starting families in their 20s, you found your loved one. So there's pivotal adult years and transition happening at that time as well that plays a part into that. And so childhood and 20s, familiar music from those times. But then also preferred, and I know that may seem, of course, you gotta like it. But it is an important piece that sometimes can get lost. Preferred music. Something else that's important to note about that is what surrounds that music for that individual. As music therapists, we're trained to prevent harm, and you think, oh, with music, it's music, how could there be harm? Sometimes with a song can trigger negative emotions and memories, especially if it's surrounding a traumatic event. And so being cognizant of what you're using with an individual, and your loved one, or maybe what you're singing, especially watching the reaction to what you're doing. That can be the first tell, right? It's not always verbal. And then thinking for a moment, oh, if that's not, that's maybe not the effect I was hoping that to have, why could it not? Maybe it's that around the time that song was popular, they lost somebody important in their life. I mean, it can, and it may not always have that direct tie. That doesn't mean, in that particular decade, I can't use that song. But but a lot of times just thinking about, you know, what you know about the situation and that person, and being mindful of what could be traumatic or harmful for that person. It was interesting, I caught some of the panel discussion. Another example, somebody said, oh, they were playing the music really loud, and that was not working. You do have to think about stimulation as well. Loud music when somebody is already distraught is a big thing. But also, if there's a lot going on, do you have music playing and the TV going at the same time? So stimulation is a piece of that too. There's just my kind of basically a digital business card. But my contact information in regards to individual music therapy, that starts with a consultation. In regards to if a loved one is in a home, I definitely encourage talking with executive director, providing information to this executive director. You may also find that I'm already there at the facility. I'm always happy to talk with facilities too about music therapy. But that is a bit about me and what I do. Do you guys have any questions?
Would you go to a home?
I do in home.
To an individual home?
Yeah, I do in home and I do facilities. Yeah. Any questions about music therapy? And
I love the idea of gentle cueing
yeah.
in the environment.
Yes.
Could that even provide like a certain structure to the day?
Of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
This is the get up song, this is the.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, yeah, you're pointing out to me, then that's how I structure my session. So we have a hello song, we have a goodbye song, and those are in there to serve those purposes, right? To provide that structure. So yes, good morning, da, da, you know, maybe that's your good morning song. Doesn't have to be that explicit though. Maybe it's a song that is very upbeat and motivating for the both of you. You know, if we're talking about a couple, for instance, and yes, there's a song to start your day. A song for mealtime, a song for bedtime, a song for when you're maybe gonna go somewhere. Absolutely. Yes. And again, you know, it's probably easier sometimes for us to think about the songs and the music that specifically address those things, right? You know, like I'm going to Kansas City literally talks about travel. But it doesn't have to be that specific either. If it's something that, for example, maybe you listen to this type of music in the car together when you go on road trips. So maybe that's the type of music you play as you're in the house getting ready to get in the car. So see how it can be very varied, and how it can be very specific.
Yeah, it would really structure the environment.
Absolutely.
Cue.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. And these are things that, it doesn't matter what you're dealing with, that can be helpful, whether it's dementia or not, yeah.
I have a question, Wallace, the most important